For years, Gorka had labored on the fringes of Washington and the far edge of acceptable debate as defined by the Citizens Republican and Democratic foreign policy elite. Today, the former national security editor for the conservative Breitbart news outlet occupies a senior job in the White House, and his controversial ideas, especially about Islam, drive Trump's populist approach to counterterrorism and national security. Amid the cheering, music and confetti that night, Gorka talked about Trump's opening shot in a high-stakes civilizational war. Still in its early days, everything's changed, Gorka said. He homed in on 3 words from Trump's dystopian inaugural address that day: radical Islamic terrorism. When he used those 3 words today, radical Islamic terrorism, he put the marker down for the whole national security establishment, Gorka told an interviewer from Fox News. For Gorka and his allies, the words are more than just a description of the enemy. They signal a radical break with the approach that Republicans and Democrats have taken over the past 16 years to counterterrorism and the Muslim world. Only days after the September 11, 2001, attacks, President George W. Bush insisted the terror strikes had violated the fundamental tenets of the Islamic faith. Islam is peace, he told a nation still reeling from grief. President Barack Obama sounded the same theme routinely during 2 terms in office. Gorka has relentlessly championed the opposite view. For him, the terrorism problem has nothing to do with repression, alienation, torture, tribalism, poverty, or America's foreign policy blunders and a messy and complex Middle East. This is the famous approach that says it is also nuanced and complicated, Gorka said in an interview. This is what I completely jettison. For him, the terror threat is rooted in Islam and martial parts of the Quran that he says predispose some Muslims to acts of terror. Anybody who downplays the role of religious ideology. They are deleting reality to fit their own world, he said. Gorka is a deputy assistant to the president. He reports to Stephen K. Bannon, Trump's chief strategist, and is a member of his Strategic Initiatives Group. Bannon has spoken in similarly apocalyptic terms of a new barbarity that threatens the Christian West. Most counterterrorism experts dismiss Gorka's ideas as a dangerous oversimplification that could alienate Muslim allies and boost support for terrorist groups. He thinks the government and intelligence agencies don't know anything about radicalization, but the government knows a lot and thinks he's nuts, said Cindy Storer, a former CIA analyst who developed the agency models that trace the path from religious zealotry to violence. Religious scholars are equally withering. I can't overstate how profoundly dangerous this is, said Amit Safi, a professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Duke University. This is music to the ears of the Islamic State. This is what they seek. Gorka has heard all of those criticisms before and fought against them often ferociously. Last month, as he celebrated at the inaugural ball, those critics no longer seemed to matter. Trump's victory demonstrated to Gorka and his supporters that the common sense of the American people counted for far more than the opinions of experts in Washington and the cloistered world of academia. His side had won. Before he wrapped up his inauguration night interview, Gorka said he had one last message for America's troops, the guys inside the machine and its enemies. He turned toward the host, his medal glinting in the TV lights. The alpha males are back, he said. The Islamic laws of war. Gorka's ideas about radical Islam began with his father's fight against the communists in his native Hungary and his deep Catholic faith. The elder Gorka and a small group of Christian students in Budapest were sending secret, coded messages to London when he was captured by the communist regime, tortured and given a life sentence. In 1956, he escaped and fled to the United Kingdom, where Gorka was born and raised. When Al-Qaeda struck on Sept. 11, Gorka said, he immediately saw the event through the prism of his father's decades-old life and death struggle. Yes, it was jihadi terrorism. But, more importantly, that event was linked to communism. It was linked to fascism, he said. Why? Because Al-Qaeda, ISIS, all of these groups are totalitarians. Either you surrender to them or they will kill you. His other insight, he said, was that the Washington foreign policy elite was too quick to discount the role of religion. Their worldview is fundamentally challenged by anybody who takes religion seriously, and you know what? I take religion seriously, Gorka said. Because when you take 7 minutes on a video to decapitate another human being by manually sawing off their head, that's the power that religion can have, or a distortion of religion, or whatever you want to call it. My father was tortured for weeks by the communist secret police in Hungary. I didn't start decapitating people when I found out what happened to my father. Gorkatm's core idea is that the United States should partner with a short list of Muslim allies: Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, that he describes as secular or willing to separate Islam from the running of the state. Together, they should fight the jihadist religious ideology in the same manner that America fought to discredit communism during the Cold War. That insight, he said, led him to study Islam, starting with the faith's ancient texts. There's a lot of misinformation out there, he said. Would you take anybody's views on Christianity seriously if they hadn't read the New Testament? Of course you wouldn't. So I read the Quran. Gorkatm's academic credentials, particularly on the subject of Islam, are thin. He went to college in London and spent 3 years as a reserve intelligence soldier in the British Army, focused on the conflict in Northern Ireland. In the 1990s and early 2000s, he cycled through think tanks in Washington and Europe, dabbled in Hungarian politics, and taught courses in counterterrorism at the George C. Marshall Center in Germany, which focuses on educating mid-career NATO and allied military officers. He earned his doctorate from a Hungarian university in 2008 and a few months later landed a faculty job at the College of International Security Affairs, CISA, a new Pentagon-funded school that was still working toward accreditation. There, he was a dynamic lecturer and an uneven scholar, said retired Col. Mike Bell, the school's chancellor. Gorka does not speak Arabic and has never lived in a Muslim-majority country. His knowledge of Islam comes largely from reading English translations of Islamic texts and interacting with foreign officers who account for about 2/3 of the CISA student body and come largely from Muslim nations. Sometimes, the Muslim students would object to his views of their religion. I tell them very simply that I am not here to debate Islam, Gorka said. Nobody has the right, even a Muslim, to talk for all Muslims. His goal, he said, was to understand how the enemy interpreted the faith. In other instances, his fellow professors would challenge his contention that the Quran's violent passages are the primary driver of terrorism. There's crazy stuff in the Bible, too, said David Ucko, who taught alongside Gorka for 3 years at CISA. Gorka countered that the argument misrepresents Christianity, and he cited the Crusades, which are often invoked as a war against Islam. The fact is that none of what happened in the Crusades can be justified by the message of Jesus Christ on the cross taking all of our sins upon himself, he said in an interview. It's just not possible. If a crusader killed a woman and child or a heathen, that cannot be theologically justified, and therefore it's wrong and it's a sin. Islam's martial passages and intermingling of faith and politics makes it different, Gorka said. If you are pro-fundamentalist in interpretation, he said, you have a lot of argumentation on your side. Ucko said he quickly dropped the argument for the sake of harmony. Gorkatm's former supervisors pushed him to incorporate other perspectives on Islam and publish in peer-reviewed journals where his ideas would be challenged and perhaps tempered, Bell said. But Gorka insisted that he wasn't interested in that kind of scholarship. What I care about is if somebody in the field is reading my article, he said. I see myself as somebody who supports the bravest of the brave, the warfighter. Publish or be damned. It'll be damned. Thank you very much. Off campus, Gorka began meeting with conservative members of Congress and lectured regularly at the Army's Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, NC. In 2014, Gorka left to take a teaching job at Marine Corps University that would give him more freedom and new influential connections. The school is part of the Defense Department, but Gorka was not hired as a government employee. His academic chair was funded by Thomas Saunders III, a major Republican Party donor and chairman of the Conservative Heritage Foundation. Saunders and Gorka were related by